When the gavel comes down in a packed committee room and the buzz of cameras settles into a steady electrical hum, a privacy hearing doesn't explode with fireworks so much as it detonates with documents, deadlines, and the stark diction of the subpoena rule. In our framing, Jasmine Crockett vs. Tech CEO, privacy hearing erupts. Read the subpoena rule. The heat is not in the insults, it's in the receipts, the timeline, and the contest over what must be produced when and in what form. Imagine the dais. Representative Jasmine Crockett recognizes her 5 minutes, a stack of exhibits tabbed and color-coded, and begins not with adjectives but with dates. On date, she says, tapping the first card, this committee issued a subpoena requiring production by deadline. On date plus X. She continues, flashing a second card. Your company acknowledged receipt and requested a rolling production. On date plus Y. A third card appears. We received 60 pages, mostly public policy statements. The room tightens because everyone knows hearings drift into talking points. What arrives now is rarer, the procedural spine of oversight. Crockett doesn't ask the CEO what they believe about privacy. She asks what they did with the subpoena. That distinction matters. It shifts the hearing from a debate club to an accountability lab, where every claim must find a document to rest on. The CEO, sitting behind a nameplate that gleams under the lights, thanks the committee and affirms respect for the process, then explains that user privacy safeguards, international data localization laws, and vendor due diligence required careful review, and crucially, that some requests may encompass data protected by legal privileges or statutory confidentiality. Crockett nods, then points to the rule. Committees do not fish, they specify. A subpoena's scope is not an invitation to overcollect, it's a fence line. If the request truly overreaches, the correct play is not to stonewall but to negotiate scope, log withheld items, and propose a protective order always anchored in the rule's text. What erupts? Here is the difference between we're working on it, and here are the tranche numbers, here is the search methodology, here is the privilege log, here are the Bates ranges already produced. The committee's majority staff prepared those ranges. Crockett reads them into the record. Every number is a receipt that can be checked later in the repository of exhibits. To the audience, this can feel as arcane as a map legend, but it is precisely how oversight becomes law, like rather than personality, driven. The subpoena rule often nested within House Rule Roman 11, and the committee's adopted procedures does not grant unlimited power. It grants a structured power bounded by relevance, due process, confidential materials, and good, faith meetand, confer obligations. Crockett emphasizes that structure. The committee must articulate a legislative purpose or oversight predicate. The company must preserve data, identify custodians, document searches, and produce or justify non-production in writing. The CEO testimony shifts toward logistics. How many custodians were queried, which email domains were swept, what retention windows apply for messages versus logs, and whether ephemeral chat channels that auto-delete were paused once the subpoena hit. This is the heart of modern privacy oversight. It isn't only about what you collect, but also what you keep, who can query it, and how you govern erasure. Crockett draws a clean line for viewers' day to governance is policy in practice. A company can publish a privacy pledge with lyrical promises, but if internal retention settings keep sensitive identifiers for years beyond necessity, the pledge is marketing. Conversely, if the law requires retention, say, for security or fraud detection and the firm deletes too aggressively, the company may be risking noncompliance. The hearing turns on those tensions, and Crockett frames them with civics rather than partisanship. The committee's job is to reconcile public claims with internal controls using documentable evidence. She displays a receipt card showing the subpoena's item 3, all communications between team and vendor regarding user data retention windows from start date to end date. The CEO acknowledges the item and explains that vendor access is controlled by contractual data processing agreements, complete with audit rights, subprocessors lists, and breach notification clauses. They add that production requires notice to certain vendors under confidentiality clauses. Crockett accepts that legal reality, but presses the obvious point. The subpoena is not a surprise memo. It's a legal instrument of the House, and vendors are not immune from lawful oversight because of boilerplate NDA. If NDA clauses block lawful production, the company must fix the clauses or seek a protective protocol with the committee again. The answer is structure, not delay. What viewers learn, and what makes this segment worthy of the ERUPTS headline, is that the theater of Congress is at its best when it cracks open systems and forces specificity. How many days from subpoena to first production, which custodians, what search terms, which systems beyond email, Slack, Jira, CRM, data lake query logs were included? Was mobile device content searched where relevant? Were privilege calls documented and logged? Did the company pause retention policies for ephemeral content once on notice? Crockett leans into those specifics because, in privacy, the receipts are the policy. Meanwhile, the CEO tries to pivot to the firm's investments, privacy, by design, differential privacy techniques in analytics, RED, team audits, bug bounty programs, and ISO/SOC certifications. All that can be real and laudable. Crockett doesn't deny it. She simply recenters the rule. Compliance claims are only as strong as the documents backing them. The power of this moment, what makes it nonpartisan, receipts. First, is that it rewards craftsmanship. If the company walked in with a tight timeline, a privilege log, a protective order proposal, and a tranche plan with dates, the hearing becomes collaborative. If the company walked in with vagueness, the hearing becomes corrective. Either way, the public wins because the exchange generates artifacts, letters, logs, schedules, and sworn testimony that later committees, courts, or watchdogs can examine. That's the point of oversight, not humiliation, not headlines, habits of producing, logging, negotiating scope, and respecting the fence line the rule draws. By the time the gavel strikes for the next member, viewers should understand that privacy hearing erupts as not code for insult real. It's shorthand for the hard mechanics of democratic inspection, where the rule is read aloud, the dates are stated plainly, and the documents either appear or their absence becomes its own receipt. To understand why this kind of hearing matters beyond a single headline, we need to walk step by step through the life cycle of a subpoena in the privacy context, and the friction points that either prove a company's governance is real or reveal that it lives mostly in slide decks. The life cycle begins with predicate. A committee articulates a legislative purpose or oversight basis, perhaps reviewing how platforms handle sensitive location data, minors' accounts, biometric identifiers, ad targeting or cross device tracking. That predicate is not a rhetorical flourish. Courts have long expected Congress to tie information, requests to a legitimate pursuit of information relevant to potential legislation or oversight of existing law. Practically, that means a subpoena will list defined topics and a date range rather than give us everything. Once noticed, a company's clock starts. The first responsibility is preservation. Issue a litigation/hold notice internally, freeze auto, deletion on relevant email and chat systems, suspend retention purges on log stores and data lakes. and ensure mobile backups, and third-party vendor environments are included. The second responsibility is identification. List custodians who plausibly hold relevant documents, privacy counsel, policy teams, trust and safety leads, data infrastructure owners, product managers, and vendor managers. The third is methodology. Define search terms, date windows, and systems to be searched: email, chat, ticketing, shared drives, code repositories where data schemas live, data governance tools, vendor portals, and audit logs. The fourth is transparency. Provide the committee a plan: this many custodians, these systems, this date range, proposed terms, proposed rolling productions so staff can object or refine before terabytes get swept pointlessly. This is what Representative Crockett means when she says, "Show your receipts." It's not a taunt, it's an invitation to govern well. When a CEO testifies that privacy is core to the company's mission, Crockett can ask for the artifacts, the data maps, systems of record and processors, the retention schedule with category by category timelines, approvals for exceptions, the DPA's data protection impact assessments for risky features, the vendor DPA data processing agreements and subprocessor lists, and the internal policy change logs correlating with public commitments. If the company can produce those swiftly, it signals that policy and practice match. If it cannot, it signals compliance debt. At this point, some executives appeal to user security or legal privilege to explain delays, and those are legitimate considerations. But the rules anticipate them. Security, sensitive material can be produced under protective protocols, camera viewing, in-camera review, or redacted copies, and privilege claims should be accompanied by logs that describe documents without exposing the protected content. Author, date, general subject, privilege basis. The key is that security and privilege are lanes, not walls. They structure production. They do not excuse non-production. Crockett's questions will often test that distinction. Did you provide a privilege log? Have you proposed a protective order so we can review sensitive architecture safely? Have you supplied Bates ranges for produced items and commit dates for remaining custodians? Each answer moves the hearing from performance to proof. Meanwhile, privacy policy specifics become cross-exam points. If the firm claims a 90-day retention window for ad identifiers, Crockett may ask for the policy version history and the rollout notes proving that window actually took effect, plus the change tickets showing older data was purged or rekeyed. If the firm says it does not sell data, she can parse the definition of sale across jurisdictions, querying whether cross-app data sharing for targeted ads or access granted to measurement partners meets the definition under certain statutes. The CEO can respond by citing regional compliance engines, purpose-based access controls, and contractual restrictions. Again, all verifiable with documents. This tug-of-proof is civics working. It's nonpartisan because the facts don't care which party is asking. A retention log is either present or absent, accurate or not. Another recurring friction point is ephemeral messaging. Many modern teams communicate in channels designed to auto-delete. Crockett can ask, once the company received the subpoena, did it disable auto-delete for relevant channels? Did it export those messages? Were employees instructed to move substantive decisions into archivable systems? If not, why not? If yes, where is the export log? The CEO may describe operational realities, global teams, mixed BYOD environments, and privacy expectations in internal chats. But again, the rule answers with structure. Preservation first, then production. If a company cannot preserve, it must explain under oath what was lost and when. That explanation becomes a receipt too. Vendor access is the next seam to probe. Most platforms rely on clouds, CDNs, analytics firms, fraud vendors, and content moderators. Crockett's question is simple. Have you notified each relevant vendor of the hold and the subpoena? Do your contracts allow production to Congress with reasonable confidentiality? If they don't, why were contracts written to obstruct lawful oversight? The CEO might respond that many contracts do allow lawful disclosures with notice, and that they've initiated those processes. Here, the timeline returns as king. We're working on it only helps if the calendar supports it. Viewers unfamiliar with congressional process might think this is just compliance theater, but it's more basic than that. In a data economy, power and risk live in metadata. How long identifiers persist, who can query them, and what logs show about access. A committee hearing that extracts those specifics teaches the public how privacy is actually engineered or neglected. Crockett's method, dates, documents, definitions, turns a viral clip into a civic lab manual. She avoids attributing motive, sticks to what's on paper, and insists on the rule being read, not merely invoked. The CEO, for their part, can earn credibility by adopting the same stance, concede what was late, commit to corrected schedules, propose concrete search expansions if gaps appear, and acknowledge that publicity is secondary to getting the production right. The best hearings end with joint clarity, a narrowed scope for remaining items, a calendar of production milestones, a protective regime for sensitive materials, and an open record that citizens can audit. That's what ERUPTS should mean in a receipts first channel, not outrage, but the sudden appearance of usable facts, dates that align, policies that match logs, and a path forward that respects both privacy and oversight. To push this exchange from a headline into a masterclass for the public, we should widen the lens around how a congressional subpoena interacts with corporate privacy programs, international data laws, and the lived reality of engineering teams who must implement retention and access controls. Start with the architecture. Most large platforms don't keep user data in a single place. They keep identity keys in one system, event logs in another, content in a third, and analytics aggregates in a fourth, each with separate retention clocks and permission models. That fragmentation is both a strength and a risk. A strength because compartmentalization can reduce blast radius in a breach. A risk because compliance must knit together those shards when the law comes calling. In a hearing titled Jasmine Crockett vs. Tech CEO, Privacy Hearing Erupts, read the subpoena rule. Crockett's most powerful tool is the disciplined question that makes silos legible. List the systems searched, the custodians attached to each system, and the retention policies in effect during the subpoena window. That single sentence forces a map. Identity graph, message stores, ad logs, security telemetry, bug trackers, data lakes, and the vendor mirrors that may contain partial replicas. The CEO, if candid and prepared, will explain how data governance catalogs map tables to purposes, how role-based and purpose-based access controls restrict queries, and how privacy review gates, often called DPIAs or LFI legal/feature intake, are supposed to catch high risk flows before code ships. Crockett's follow-up is where oversight becomes tangible. Show us the DPIA for feature X, the sign-off owner, the mitigations implemented, and the date they landed in production. If a company has treated privacy as a real discipline, those artifacts exist with timestamps. If not, the vacuum is audible. Now layer in international obligations. A U.S. subpoena lands alongside EU GDPR requirements, UK adequacy questions, Brazil's LGPD, and a patchwork of state laws inside the U.S. The wrong corporate instinct is to treat these as shields against oversight. The right instinct is to propose a lawful path, protective orders, secure review rooms, redactions that respect foreign data subject rights, while still giving Congress the truth it needs about governance. Crockett can model that path on camera. We will review sensitive architecture in camera with logging and redaction protocols. We do not need raw user content to verify that your retention windows are honored. That is receipts, first, and privacy, sensible. The subpoena rule, read properly, does not demand exposure. It demands verifiable proof. Enter the privilege log, a misunderstood workhorse. Privilege is not a black hole. It is a scaffold. A privilege log should list author, date, recipients, subject line, generic, and the privilege claimed. A well-run company can produce such a log within days because it maintains matter codes and discovery playbooks. A company improvising compliance will stumble here, and the stumble is diagnostic. Crockett can ask for the privilege log and then spot check with a protective protocol, minimizing any genuine chilling effect while maximizing transparency. Meanwhile, viewers deserve clarity on security as a reason to delay. True security concerns justify method, not inertia. If producing an audit log risks exposing attack surfaces, the committee can review in a secure facility, with fields masked as needed, and request derived statistics instead of raw secrets. The CEO who meets that halfway earns credibility. The CEO who waives security, like a curtain, earns questions about whether security is cover for chaos. Another axis is algorithmic accountability. Privacy hearings often bump into recommender systems, content moderation signals, fraud scoring, and ad auctions. Crockett's receipts first style should avoid philosophy and ask for the levers. What features are logged, which ones persist beyond X days, who can alter thresholds, and how audit trails record those alterations. Here, the subpoena's timeline matters because models drift. A company might claim today's stricter retention, while the subpoena window concerns last year's laxer settings. That is why version histories and change tickets are receipts. They freeze the story in time. Crockett can anchor with on date, your policy said Y. On date plus 45, it said Z. Produce the rollout plan and the deprecation order for the old pipeline. For the public, this is the Rosetta Stone, understanding that privacy is less about slogans and more about calendars, configs, and commits. Next, address consent and sale discourse with rigor. Companies often say, we don't sell data, defining sale narrowly as cash for records, while some statutes define sale to include sharing for targeted advertising or value exchange. Crockett, staying nonpartisan, can show both definitions on screen and ask the company which definition it uses in its public statements, whether those statements were updated when state laws changed, and how purpose limitation is enforced in the ad tech chain. Consent strings, vendor lists, enforcement audits, and kill switches when partners misbehave. Those are not gotchas, they are governance. The CEO can respond by citing CMP integrations, regular vendor attestations, automated enforcement in SDK, and sanctions when partners violate terms. Crockett's next move is consistent. Receipt that vendor termination letters, audit summaries, incident postmortems. If such items exist, the audience learns that enforcement is real. If not, they learn marketing outran muscle. Tangle 2 with ephemeral communications. Engineers use channels designed to auto-delete precisely because they reduce surface area. But when a subpoena lands, those channels must be paused for relevant teams. Crockett can ask, provide the admin logs showing retention policy changes for channel on date. A request that neither exposes private chatter nor lets the company pretend ephemerality absolves preservation duties. The overarching civics lesson is that Congress is not a court, but the good habits of litigation holds logs, scope letters, rolling productions make congressional oversight fair, efficient, and respectful of sensitive data. The best cameras catch that habit formation in real time, Crockett proposes a protective order. The CEO agrees to specific tranche dates. Staff enters a schedule into the record, and the hearing produces an architecture diagram annotated with retention clocks. That is television worth having, not because it shames, but because it teaches. Finally, bring the public inside the process by naming the appeal paths. If a dispute remains, say, over trade secrets the company can ask for in-camera review, or the committee can escalate with contempt risk if noncompliance persists. Crockett's tone should make clear that escalation is a last resort. The preference is always structure, cooperation, and verifiable receipts. That tone, neutral, relentless, precise, creates a blueprint any future witness can follow and any viewer can audit. It is what we mean by ERUPTS without the sneer, a burst of clarity as rules, rights, and responsibilities lock into place, and the paper trail becomes the star. Now we close by translating this hearing into a playbook, one part for lawmakers and staff, one part for witnesses and counsel, and one part for the audience who will decide whether any of this deserves their trust. For lawmakers and staff, the playbook begins weeks before the cameras roll. Define your legislative predicate crisply, what statute might change and why, write request lists that align with that. Predicate, pre-negotiate scope with counsel, and publish a model protective order so security. Sensitive materials can flow without drama. During the hearing, keep questions laddered. 1 timeline notice, hold, search, produce. 2 systems and custodians. 3 retention and deletion. 4 vendor controls. 5 logs and audits. 6 specific disputed items with a proposed resolution path. Conclude each member's time with a concrete artifact request. Bates ranges for item 3 by Friday. Privilege log for items 5-7 by next Wednesday. Admin retention log excerpts for channels a C within 10 days, so the public can watch promises turn into pages. For witnesses and counsel, preparation is not polishing adjectives. It is building a binder or a secure tablet with the artifacts the committee will demand. Data maps, retention schedules, DPAs. DPA terms, subprocessor lists, change tickets, admin logs, incident postmortems, and a production plan with tranche dates and search methodologies. Resist the reflex to overclaim and underdeliver. If a date will slip, bring an alternative accompanied by compensating transparency, expanded custodian set, broader system search, or interim summaries that allow the committee to verify directionally correct progress. Treat privilege and trade secrets not as shields but as routing instructions. Accompany every refusal with logs and an offer of in-camera review under the protective framework the committee already published. Operationalize this mindset inside the company before Congress calls. Practice holds, test exports, rehearse cross-border data flows under lawful mechanisms, and implement kill switches for non-compliant vendors. Doing so turns a hostile spotlight into a professional audit you can ace in public. For the audience, citizens, journalists, technologists, the playbook is simpler. Watch the sequence, not the sound bites. Did the member read the rule text? Did the witness answer with documents or commit to documents rather than slogans? Did dates align? Were privileges logged? Were security concerns converted into protective review rather than used as a fog machine? Treat each receipt card as a breadcrumb you can later verify in published repositories, and reward the side that makes verification easy. This is how a nonpartisan receipts first ethos grows beyond a single clip. It becomes a civic habit. In the specific, Jasmine Crockett vs. Tech CEO. Frame, the final act should show an action matrix on screen. Items produced, items scheduled, items in dispute with agreed process, and items resolved via protective protocols. This is not just aesthetic, it's accountability. If 2 weeks later the schedule isn't met, The follow-up segment writes itself with dates and document counts rather than adjectives. Meanwhile, we should expand the lens to enduring policy questions made legible by the hearing. Should retention clocks be statutorily capped for certain sensitive identifiers? Should vendor contracts in regulated sectors include a standard clause enabling lawful oversight by Congress, subject to protective conditions? Should ephemeral messaging used for corporate decision-making be presumptively preserved upon legal notice? These are not partisan gotchas. They are governance choices the public can debate with receipts in hand. In closing, reject the false binary that pits privacy against oversight. The trustworthy posture is privacy with oversight. The committee does not need to see your raw user photos to verify that you delete geolocation identifiers on schedule. It needs to see policies, logs, and audits that a competent engineer could use to reproduce the deletion. The witness does not need to dignify speculative accusations. They need to provide concrete artifacts that dissolve speculation. The chair does not need to flex contempt on camera. They need to structure a path that makes noncompliance visible and unattractive. And the minority does not need to defend a company or attack one. It needs to defend the map, ensuring the subpoena rule, the protective order, and the rights of data subjects are all honored in sequence. If we do this right, a video titled Privacy Hearing Erupts, Read the Subpoena Rule will land as more than virality. It will teach millions the choreography of lawful transparency in a desaturated republic. Viewers will learn why timelines matter, how logs tell the truth, why vendor clauses shouldn't muzzle oversight, and how both government and industry can earn trust by building systems that leave checkable trails. That is the quiet revolution hiding inside the noise. A culture that treats receipts as the common language across politics and platforms. It won't eliminate disagreement, it will civilize it. Tomorrow's companies will still collect data. Tomorrow's Congress will still investigate. But after enough hearings run this playbook, dates, documents, definitions, decisions, the center of gravity moves from outrage to architecture. And architecture is where democracies endure, in the choice to bind power with process, to convert light into heat only when it reveals, and to make our most passionate debates provable by the very paper that outlasts us.